Hello, hello, Brooke. How
Hi,
good to have you. How good to be with you.
I'm
I've
so
been,
happy to be with you. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for coming. I have so much that I want to talk to you about, and we have really seems very little time. So I'm going to go right ahead and start with introducing your to audience who may not be familiar with you through your bio.
Okay,
It's a
great.
nice little, yeah. So Brooke Teisui McNamara Sensei, MFA, is a poet, transmitted Zen teacher, and mama. She has published two books of poems, Bury the Seed and Feed Your Vow. She loves to create poems in three main ingredients: the raw material of everyday life, wholehearted and visceral listening, and the mind of meditation. For her poetry, Brooke is the recipient of the Charles B. Palmer Prize from the Academy of American Poets. She has practiced Zen as a student of Diane Musho Hamilton Roshi since 2010, receiving monk ordination in 2012 and Dharma transmission in 2023. Prior to 2010, she was a student of non-dual teacher and poet Dorothy S. Hunt. Brooke has taught at Naropa University in yoga studies and at the University of Colorado Boulder in dance. Brooke is president and the founding teacher at Dragon Lake Zen and teaches in-person and online courses and retreats to facilitate the awakening and unfolding of innate wisdom, compassion, artistry, and play. She lives in Boulder, Colorado, with her husband, Rob, and their two sons, Lundin and Orion. It sounds like a full, beautiful life.
It really is.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Brooke, let's see. I do have a lot that I want to ask you and talk with you, and we're not going to get to. So let's start somewhere.
Mhm.
Let's, how about if we start kind of dismantling this title that I've made up for this event? Work
Mm,
martyrs, workaholics, play
mm,
mind,
mm,
hypervigilance,
mhm,
and burnout.
mhm.
How about if we, do you relate to some of these things? Do you relate to, or did you relate at any point in your life to, would you say, what do you think the difference is between workaholism and relating to being a work martyr, if you do?
Mm.
Hmm.
Yes, I relate to the title, and I think I always have. And I relate as just as much to the problem of being a work martyr as I do to the freedom, the inherent liberation of play mind, which in my experience, and I think I've heard you point to this, that it's ever present. Play mind is right here. It always is. It's right here. It's a blink of an eye away from our ability to inhabit it. It's what we are, and children know that, and we can unpack more what we both experience play mind to be a little bit later. But um, for me, just given my conditioning as an American who grew up Catholic, and I trained in ballet 5 days a week, and I went to a school whose slogan was literally academics, academics, academics. It was a very rigorous private school, and I just innately was driven. I don't know why, but so I had all these different structures in my life that provided a place where I could work myself really hard, and I just did, to the point where my mother would often intervene and provide a boundary and say, no, we're gonna pull back a little bit and let you rest. And again, I don't know where that drive comes from. It feels partly innate, partly enculturated. Um, and as much as I love to play and laugh, and my work has always been creative, and now I've practiced Zen for 15 years and I'm just beginning to teach Zen. So there's been a lot of unlearning and dismantling of workaholism and work martyrism, but it's still honestly for me a moment to moment dance and choice. It feels more like a choice now than it used to, but I can feel in any given moment I'm tipping into this mindset, or I'm choosing and remembering to play within whatever context this moment holds. So I feel the theme is very alive for me.
Next the two of us. And yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this moment to moment dance is it's beautiful. It seems like, I mean, my teacher was just saying this weekend that the beginning of the path and the beginning of the path, if the path were from here to here, the beginning of the path would be up to here. So it's a long way into the beginning of the path, and then you're already at the end of the path until the switch may happen where we are PlayMind.
Mm-hmm.
For forevermore. And then there's endless to go from there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this moment to moment dance, how do we cultivate this if we were even in the trenches of this state,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just the wheel is turning so fast, I don't even know how to stop. How would you say we can get into this dance from a moment to moment, even in the more intensive stages of this?
In my experience, there's two kind of dimensions to the practice of remembering PlayMind. One is utter surrender. It's like I just admitting, it's admitting and realizing I don't have control. And so surrendering to the possibility that I think I said to you before we started this, that this will be a lifelong practice as far as I'm concerned, probably, I don't know. And so just in admitting I might fall into work martyrdom on and off for the rest of my life, that actually creates a little space for me to laugh and turn the whole thing on its head, where even this is a game
Yes.
that has a little space and it has a little vitality and there's some humor and there's some possibility. And it's like, okay, well, this is apparently a game I'm playing in this lifetime of forgetting PlayMind, remembering PlayMind, forgetting PlayMind, remembering PlayMind. And then it just becomes a little more tender, a little more worthy of my own compassion, a little more connective. Like, I know you and I have something we share, that this is just a dance we're in, and many people are in this dance. And so there's something about just yielding to the whole darn thing that seems like it's a similar gesture as in meditation, of just sitting down into it and joining with what is. And then there's also, the part of us that is becoming, that exists in time, that we may have some choice to shape and create intention and vow around. And even in my bio, I was glad to hear that I had put play in my bio, that it is a core value: wisdom, compassion, artistry, and play. Those four feel like features of true nature, and also values of mine that I want to practice practically tuning to and embodying. So in the more practical, on the ground level, I honestly have just set up cues for myself everywhere. It's like the man I married is so funny and playful. And I think I fell in love with him and married him as a mirror to remind me that I am that too. And so a lot of close relationships have multiple dimensions to them, but one of them is the reason I've cultivated those relationships is because there's a capacity for play and humor and liberation in that way. Even my Zen teacher is so funny. It's one of the first things I was really drawn to her and recognized in her is her capacity to laugh at herself, make me laugh, see the tenderness and irony in reality. Um, and then I think I've just cultivated habits to get myself to play more. Like my work is poetry and meditation, and both of those always leave me refreshed and vitalized. And so even if the play doesn't look light and jolly, it sometimes does, but I don't think that's all that play is. I would define play as wholehearted participation with this moment. And so sometimes play looks like wholehearted grief, or it looks like wholehearted concentration. And so I think actually, yeah, just creating habits and daily activities and art around the house so that everywhere I kind of turn, I'm reminded to just be fully here and allow my heart to open to this moment. And then my definition of play starts to complexify and get wider. And I realize I don't have to do anything to change myself to be PlayMind. I just already am. So the whole, the being aspect of play and the becoming aspect of play, they sort of morph into and out of each other, if that makes sense.
It sure does. Said like a poet.
I'm
Yeah.
glad it makes sense. I'm glad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We already are it, and then there's always the coming shining forth that is that we have the choice of to be one way or another. It's
Mhm.
yeah, it is play, and it can look like anything at all. It doesn't have to look one way or another. It's just
Yeah,
yeah, being wholeheartedly participating in whatever
yeah,
is just is surrender.
yeah,
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 makes sense. It does. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's yeah, I'm it's like in your conversation you're already a poet, and now I would love to hear a poet to share with the audience.
Mm,
Would
a
that
poem,
be yeah, would you
of
share one with
course.
us?
Yes, of course. So, um, I have a lot of my poems actually include some kind of element of play because again, it's a practice that I tend to either find play or I use to cultivate play. And so I chose a couple to bring here, and the one I'm looking at, it happens to be about one of my sons. He's now almost 10, but this I wrote when he was 2, so it's an 8-year-old poem. Um, and you'll see that it's not a traditional or it's not a simple embodiment of play. It includes some different layers that might feel more tender. Um, it points to impermanence, which I think also is a doorway and a portal to PlayMind, is actually touching like, wow, everything really is changing all the time. And to feel that tenderizes my heart and allows me to laugh both. So um, this poem is called I Want That Goose to Be a Tree. Yeah. You'll see why. I want that goose to be a tree. Yesterday, I picked up my 2-year-old son from his first day of preschool, drenched in some post-play euphoria I'd never yet seen. His tiny eyes opened to the joyride of finger paint, lunchboxes, and songs. But halfway home, his bliss crested and plunged into a huge new grief, which he wailed and howled out from his car seat behind me. Look at that huge goose right there, I offered for distraction as we drove past the waddling flock. I want that goose to be a tree, he cried. What did you just say? I want that goose to be a tree, as sorrowful and stricken as you can imagine. I felt for him, of course, his world overwhelmed, breaking and opening with the onset of school. But also, I thought, how creative, how wonderfully, deeply creative. I want that goose to be a tree. Yes, I'd never thought of it, but that desire is fully available. And what else? I want this poem to pour me a glass of red wine. And I want this poem to become a glass of red wine. I want this to be your wine or whatever beverage you long for most right now. And I want this sentence to hand it to you and watch soulfully while you stop everything to simply drink. To drink and know that your hands can be birds and your eyes were once telescopes, and the one you dream about lives locked inside you in a gesture you just haven't performed yet. But that tree could teach it to you if you sat and listened long enough, if you let your heart suddenly touch and sound its held wail for the truth that everything is always changing and breaking and opening, that our drinks together here are almost done. So I think practice, any kind of practice that works, will bring us closer to this place of sensing, not only conceptually, but really feeling in our bodies how what we're losing, what's emerging, and to really encounter that. Like I said, it tenderizes the tissues of our heart, and in my experience, it just softens everything, and it allows life force to flow, and it allows truth to flow. And so I think impermanence is a really important key to play, to a key to open PlayMind, because it allows us to feel it all. You know, if I want to feel the joy of PlayMind, I need to also feel the other kind of underbelly textures of grief and loss. And like Kahil Gibran says, the more that sorrow carves through our being, the more joy we can contain. So that poem was really surprising and fun to write. I had no idea where it was going as I was writing it. I was just kind of tracking, sniffing along the path, and then it unfolded. And by the end, I was kind of like really, I think, teary. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Silence is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. After these words, all I can desire is silence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. Yes. I'm not going to go too deep into it now. Yeah. How about a story, maybe? Or I don't need to make up a question, really. Let me see if there's a real question here, because this is it's a very open space that you made with this poem.
Mm.
It's wishing the goose to be tree is what we're doing every moment, right? Like we're wishing something was something else. Oh, and the key is to not to accept or reject, but just to be in whatever it is without the constant wishing for it to be something else. And then the controlling and the manipulating and the dancing a little too sharp on the edges kind of things start creeping up,
Mhm.
right? So yeah. And then there is the wishing that the goose would be a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. The forgetting. Without the forgetting, there's no remembering.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think um I find that to play for me to actually play and amplify, like sometimes if I notice I'm wishing that the goose was a tree, wishing this moment was different in any way, um I sometimes feel the capacity to notice that and let it go and be
Mhm.
here. And that of course can be trained. um there's a practice that we do where we just say gone and let it go. And sometimes it's like magic. It's just it is possible to let go. Letting go
Yeah.
is possible. And then sometimes if I if I notice that I can't let go for whatever reason, or there's just a there's some kind of intelligence that I trust that actually compels me to play with the thing. Like, oh, you want that goose to be a tree? Well, what do I want? I wish I'd like a glass of wine right now or whatever. It's a cup of tea maybe. And then I want to break the rule of what's called the fourth wall in performance or poetry. I want to break the fourth wall right now in this poem and connect to the reader. Like I'd love to play with the reader who's reading this and have a drink together. And what else do to really let my imagination go all the way with that wishing the moment was different, will kind of exercise it all the way to exhaustion into silence. And so I find myself either, yeah, usually doing one of those two things, letting go or
Mhm.
playing with my very human impulses all the way into like a kind of absurdity or finding something beautiful or bizarre through creative practice or play or just through an imaginative moment. And that leads me to being able to let go, if that makes sense. But that's why I really think that meditation and creative practice are really friends, because they allow both the emptiness and the fullness of being human. uh,
Yeah.
yeah, does that make sense
It
to
makes so much sense, so much sense. And it's both of those choices are with the same one choice of play mind, aren't they? Because
Yeah,
you still have a space between your body mind, your person,
yeah.
and your play mind, for the lack of a better word, your innate nature of witnessing. And then even beyond that you can the emptiness that you can. So the three kind of are merging. You're becoming the space in between
Mhm.
when you're doing that, so
Mhm.
that you're not really lost in the doing, you're still playing.
Yes, yeah, yeah, exactly. It does require um recognition of the space that's there. And I think it's not that the space is ever gone, the space to make a choice with how we engage our minds, but sometimes we just forget the space is there and it feels like I'm just wedded and embedded with these patterns that I have to enact. And I think that's when PlayMind is most asleep. That's when I get most into work martyr patterns, is when I forget about the space to make a choice with how I engage in momentum or karma or conditioning. um, as long as there's that little bit of space, like you were saying, then maybe I can let go, or maybe I can go for some kind of creative ride.
And
Yeah,
it does take practice.
it
It
does.
does take practice to be able to, because, it's so fascinating. The whole game, the whole phenomena is just so much distraction, and so much is always
Yeah.
there to
Yeah.
pull you in, and once you get pulled in, then you give your finger, and then your arm, and then your legs.
Yeah.
Before
Yeah.
you know it, it's all gone. And so there, that little space, making that little space in between, and to really live there
Mhm.
gradually, incrementally, more and more so, takes
Mhm.
practice. And there's so many practices, and there's so many games and methods, and yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, just remembering is definitely, if we can do that, then if we can't, then we can, what do you think? What do you think? Like, um, I mean, we're introducing all of these methods too. How do you think? Like, I write, and I
Mhm.
still and I've been writing for very many years, since I can remember almost.
Mhm.
And I am not a poet at all. So, it's there's the ability to allow oneself to do things that we haven't done before. So for someone who doesn't even write, maybe don't even journal, journaling could be a great entryway,
Mhm.
would you say?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, journaling could be a good entry. It takes off the pressure of I'm writing now.
Yeah. Oh
I'm
yeah.
gonna write a poem. Like, it's like, wow, no, I don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, I started writing, I just felt compelled to write from childhood on, but it was kind of somewhat natural and satisfying and somewhat torturous
Mhm.
until I started practicing meditation, honestly. And so I have really come to practice and teach that for me, writing, whether it's poetry or just kind of free writing, what works for me is to think of it not as a writing practice. I think of it as a listening practice. Um, because if I sit down to try to write something, especially if I'm going to try to write a good poem, it's just it's a setup for disappointment.
Mhm.
Whereas if I sit down to meditate or just listen, that's why in my bio also it says I like to make poems out of the raw material of everyday life, because if I pay attention, there's always a story in at least one a day that's interesting content.
Mhm.
Then if I add in the practice, like you said, it takes practice to um, for me to organize my body into stillness. And then if I just bring my body and mind into harmony via my breath, and then just sit, the primary practice in Zen is just sitting. It's the method of no method. Um, what I find is it sensitizes my perception. So either there's a cessation, an experience of things coming to rest, or me recognizing a dimension of rest. Or if I am perceiving sensory experience, it just get more um, things slow down and I feel more sensitivity. For better or worse, sometimes it's hard to be more sensitive to what I'm hearing and thinking and everything. But in terms of being a human, that's the way I want to be anyway. And then the poem ends up being just a byproduct. I never think of it as the primary goal. It's kind of an artifact, or like Leonard Cohen says, if your life is burning well, poetry is just the ash. Um, so if I come back to listening, it just always humbles me and puts me in a more receptive state. And then often I'll hear things kind of bubble up and I don't know where they come from, and I don't know if they're good. But if they feel true, meaning like they make me feel as like sometimes I'll end up crying as I'm writing and I don't even know why, or laughing. Or sometimes it feels like eros, like there'll be a quality of like turned on by life, like vitality, or just some kind of energy. That's when I'll write something down, and then I'll kind of play with it and work with it using some of my poetry training from school. But that's always coming later now. That's the way that I find satisfaction writing, is to think of it as listening.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. So it's like a pointless play without a aim,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. It's like yeah, so we could do this in journaling also, and as a step forward, if I'm imagining times when you know the anxiousness and the need to move and do something is so on the move. It has such a momentum behind it that to be able to sit and listen is not even available maybe
Yeah.
at times.
Yeah.
And you also do dance.
Yeah.
Yes, and dance can be also another way of allowing that energy to find expression in a positive way without, you know, perpetuating
Yeah.
the same cycle, but starting a new one where PlayMind is in play. Would you say? Well, tell us about your dancing.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not dancing professionally anymore. I stopped dancing professionally a few years ago, but from when I was like 4 years old, I started dancing, and like 9 years old, I started writing. So they were both really early impulses, and then they both went through their own process of training, but then getting less confident and less connected to the original impulse, if that makes sense, and then figuring out how to carry certain aspects of training forward and how to let other aspects go so that it can be, like you just said, fresh, and reconnect moment to moment to a really kind of innocent or original or just fresh, spontaneous way and reason for dancing and writing. So now I just dance for fun with my kids around the house. And I was going to say, one of my favorite things to do is go for a walk and just feel that as like a very basic kind of dance, we could call it. And if there's days when listening, I'll tell students if sitting still and listening feels not available because there's restless energy, going for a walk and listening is a great option too. And there's always stories happening in nature and wonder to be found and strange, unexpected, surprising things. And I think surprise is one of the other, and it's another key element of play mind and of good art, I think, is when you can feel that an artist has been changed and surprised in the process of making their work. I think that's contagious. You can kind of feel like, oh, something was discovered here rather than like pre-planned and then executed. Something was actively unfolding. That has vitality in it and the capacity to awaken a viewer to this moment. And nature has that. So walking in nature is always I think a good way into play mind, creativity, awakening.
Totally. Yeah. As you were talking about walking, I was remembering how sometimes when I walk, I like to um, put my body into another person's body, mimicking their walk, and because everybody walks in such an incredibly particular way, it is a dance.
Yeah.
And when I put my body in that motion, just mimicking and it takes a little practice to be able to do, sometimes more or less, and
Yeah.
and it's a dance, all right. Yeah, and then you get to feel so much more information is available that way by putting my body into
Yeah.
a different movement than my body is used to.
Yeah.
Access different ways of perceiving and being.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to do that in the dance company that I was in San Francisco about 15 years ago, called Levy Dance. We would sometimes do that as an exercise where we would try to move as another member of the company and and approach it from different ways, like study kind of what are the mechanical things that I can notice and then try to execute those versus just kind of, can I empty myself out and like imagine from the inside out that I'm them? And if I fill myself with what I perceive as like the essence of who they are, then maybe I can just easily move like them. And I actually recommend to my poetry students, sometimes there's sometimes an aversion to imitate writers that they like, and I will encourage them actually to do the opposite and really try. If you love Billy Collins or Mary Oliver or Naomi Shihab, whoever your favorite poet is, I encourage them to try to get as close to that voice and what's magic about that voice. Try as much as you can to do that. And in doing so, you might capture some of that poet's magic, but you can't help but be yourself. Like your uniqueness will also spring forth because you can't write the same poem as Billy Collins. And so it will reveal how you're not him by trying to be him. And so it's kind of a reverse psychology way of finding our own voice by trying really hard to be someone else. And and then always, we can give that poet credit to, like, under the title, write their name after so and so. But there's just so many ways in
Yeah,
to play. There's so
yeah.
many ways in if we're interested. I think if it's an intention that's genuine, we're gonna find it. It's gonna find us because it's what we are.
Yeah, yeah, and if we can, yeah, it all really is uh to remember that it is who we are. And yeah, I lost my train of thought there. I had too many thoughts coming in. Yes.
Well, I always love an invitation to silence. I mean, that it feels so good to connect through words, and it also feels so good to
Yes,
connect in
yes,
silence.
yes. Well, if we're gonna speak words, your words of poetry, it's like can't beat that.
Hmm.
You like to read another one?
Sure. I do have one that's a little bit, we were talking about surprise and we were talking about silence and listening, and so I have this poem. It's a little silly, but that's okay. And
Yeah, silly is
about
great.
this happened a few months ago, and I was engaged in a practice of writing a poem a day for fun and just to see what would happen. So this was the poem of the day about a year ago, and it's called Tone of Voice. Tone of voice. This morning at the gym, while filling my water bottle in the locker room, a woman who seemed a couple decades ahead of me, but much more spry, wearing a fluorescent orange 1980s print Speedo swimsuit, stopped to compliment my very short haircut. I wish I could do that, but my husband would just hate it, she said. And it looks fabulous and so easy. Her chin length bob jostled around her jawline, and I just nodded, smiling a thank you, taking it all in. After walking away for 2 seconds, she abruptly turned back, threw her hand on her sternum, and passionately declared, "Well, now you've put the deadly sin of envy in my heart." I laughed so hard I spit water, and our eyes shared and reverberated the joy of the punchline. I still can't say how she delivered such a line, injecting me with instant, involuntary effervescence. I wonder often about how soul, speech, and silence intertwine, how lifeless words can be when they don't rise from realness, how piercing a single syllable that's spontaneous and true, how I can sense the sweetness and quiet in your listening right now, and how when she said, deadly sin of envy in my heart, what I heard was, we're strangers and we're also friends. And it's all so ridiculous and somehow also so deeply okay.
Medicine,
Mm.
pure medicine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's but a moment of trust that it's okay.
Mhm.
And and then there's many, many things that can lead the way.
Mhm.
The the only obstacle, I guess, is not believing that it's possible, that
Yeah.
the choices are so narrowed down. It seems there's only one choice, and that's just continually run and run, do until we're a human doing instead
Yeah.
of human being. And
Yeah.
then the human being is still there. So one moment of trust
Mhm.
to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
That it's okay to be ridiculous. We're not
Yeah.
gonna die, and we
Yeah.
are anyway.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
will be worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my dear friends and collaborators, her name's Rachel Blackman. She lives in the UK. She's an actress and a somatic somatics teacher, and she's also a theater maker. And so she shared this quote with me from a French professor and clown. He's a professional clown named Philippe Gaulier. And he says, you will feel ridiculous and sensitive. And to feel ridiculous and sensitive is good for you. To feel ridiculous and sensitive is part of freedom. So if that feels very much like what you were just pointing to, that it's okay to take a risk and be absurd. You're not going to die, and we are going to die anyway. So why not take little risks for the sake of feeling alive? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a story bubbling up in me, which is sort of personal, but I'm okay to share it if
Please, please.
yeah. My husband, who I said is one of the funniest and most playful people I know, and he's also a Zen teacher, and he has the biggest heart I know. He's so loving, and he had a heart attack in November, so about 4 months ago, and you know, it's still shocking to me. I'm still processing it, and I was there, and I got to be with him, and it was terrifying, and I could feel the value of practice in terms of just being able to stay present and feel the sensations of terror and um, uncertainty and huge love. And um, when when we had taken the ambulance to the hospital and he'd gone to the triage room, and then he went to get a stent put in his heart to open the blockage, I couldn't go with him during that part, but the doctor pulled me in as soon as it was done and showed me the video footage. And as soon as I saw the video of the stent going in and opening and the blood flowing again, I finally just lost it, and I was crying a lot out of relief and release. And then I got to go in and see Rob in the um, surgery room, and he was wrapped in blankets, and the doctor was there. And I came over and I put my hands on him, and I just started crying, crying, crying even more. And he looked at me and he said, "I love you." And then he looked at the doctor. He said, he had been playing hockey when he had the heart attack. He had a heart attack in the middle of his hockey game. He looked at the doctor, and in this state, he said, "Hey, hey, doc, you think I can get back on the ice tomorrow?" And the doctor looked at me. I mean, it just like short circuited because I was crying, and I think he was expecting Rob to be scared and emotional. But it's just what I love about him in that like really tender, terrifying moment. He just cracked a joke with the doctor, and the doctor didn't know what to do. It's like I saw his mind stop. He started, he threw his head back. He started cracking up. He put his hand on Rob and he said, "I don't think so, brother. It's going to take a little longer than tomorrow." But the, some of the other triage doctors and other people came up to me later and said, "God, your husband's amazing." He was like fist bumping us and cracking jokes all along the way. And I was like, that's just who he is. He was also tender. It was between joking and being tender. But it's a powerful, I think, story about the possibility of staying playful even in dire circumstances, not to escape necessarily, although maybe that's helpful too, but as a way to recognize vitality and possibility and absurdity and love in any moment.
And without the tenderness of grief, basically what grief has to teach, it can become kind of, you know, mocky, or it can end up hurting people, right? The sense of humor, if we didn't have the tender heart, then it wouldn't quite be humor.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, is that PlayMind, as I value it and experience it, it includes feeling it all, like we said before, including anger too. You know, the kind of anger that rises up from care and seeks justice. That too can be a form of PlayMind. It doesn't have to look a certain way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For me, you know, I had to, you know, it's a thin line for every. It's so personal. Each of us have such a personal flavor of, you know, like for me, the anger was something that I had to put a full stop on for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the compassion and the anger that came up even from, you know, justice, which is the key value for me personally. So because it is so, that I had to really kind of like put a cork on my anger for a very long period of time. It's like 10 years, even in whatever circumstance, just to practice that I personally, I'm not in a place to play with anger,
Mm-hmm.
because my line is blur. I have to first get it, you know, right within myself, so
Mm-hmm.
that I can play that way as well. And I'm still, you know, I'm still really careful about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so for each of us, one thing or another can be really tricky, like the humor we were talking about. Without the tenderheartedness, if one thinks that they're so funny and humorous, but it's ending up hurting people's feelings, that's not humor at all,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Same
Yeah.
with anger.
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you say for someone to find out where their you know, pinpoint places might be?
And by pinpoint, do you mean like,
Yeah, like how would I be able to pinpoint if that anger is an area where I need to really be careful, or spontaneity, let's say spontaneity can be
Yeah.
one for people. People can think it's oh, I'm being spontaneous,
Yeah.
but it's really not so easy to be spontaneous, right?
Yeah. 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 I really appreciate what you're bringing up, and what I hear is the importance. It feels like another aspect of play that is not, again, obvious, but the capacity to inhibit expression. Like, it's easy to think of play as expression,
Mhm.
play as movement, play as another form of doing, but we can also play with choosing not to, like you were just saying, for the sake of growth, wisdom, compassion, expressing my awakeness coherently. I could realize I need to actually practice not doing something. And I think I studied Alexander technique in graduate school for dance, and the word for that is inhibit. It's like, just basically don't do until we can transmute the energy internally into something that feels, maybe we could say, life-giving or connective, rather than destructive or unconscious. And so when you asked, how would I speak to someone's, if there's a challenging or a sticky place in their expression, because play isn't just like do whatever. It's not a free for all. There's ethics involved too. And my teacher often, her first teacher before she found Zen was Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, Tibetan tradition at Naropa Institute, it was called then. So she often quotes him as saying, be yourself, the world will give you feedback. And so she'll often encourage us to experiment with expressing ourselves freely, as compassion, and then notice. Don't just do it, but notice what's the feedback. And sometimes the feedback's really obvious from a friend or from a child or a boss or whatever. Or sometimes it's more subtle and energetic, but we feel it. It's like we try to make a joke and no one laughs. And that's feedback. Maybe it was more hurtful than we intended, like you were saying. Or if we do express anger, does that create a sense of connection and truth? If so, maybe that anger is a useful flavor of expression. Or when we express anger, does the other person seem absolutely crushed, and do we feel disconnected? And that's another kind of feedback. So again, it's humbling. It's like we're never going to arrive to some perfect place, but we can experiment and really listen to the feedback. How am I impacting? And if it's not obvious, we can ask. I'll ask a lot to my husband or trusted friends, like, how'd you experience me in that moment? And they'll say, oh, great, like it was enlivening or whatever. Or like, oh, you seemed a little, people I trust that I want feedback from.
Mhm.
Is that
Yeah,
helpful?
yeah. Yeah. Listening, it comes back to listening and being receptive, right? To being receptive and open and listening and dancing with that gently. Yeah. Yeah. What would you like to say last? I knew this time was not going to be enough for anything. Yes. Yeah. How can we bring it home to PlayMind now?
To end, I would just invite anyone who has listened all this way. First, I would say thank you for staying with us in this conversation. All of these topics and threads are really near and dear to me, and so I appreciate your attention if you're still listening and watching. And I would just invite us all to feel ourselves in this moment, to feel where we're touching the ground and the earth, to feel our hearts beating with aliveness and curiosity, and notice whatever seeds of resonance and truth are in your heart or in your body or your mind. And I hope those seeds will serve you and bloom, and anything that didn't feel relevant can just slough off into the earth to be composted for a new life. And I just wish everyone really a lot of true play, authenticity, and discovery of this beautiful reality that we are.
And you have a free gift, guys.
I do.
I'm looking forward to that myself.
It's actually, I've titled it Flirting with PlayMind. So it's 3 poems and writing prompts. So it's 2 of the poems I read today, and then 1 more, and then some very simple writing prompts after each poem that people can journal in response to, and just see where that takes them. And there's like a little introductory page with some writing about play from my perspective.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you so much, Tchera.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening.